Good evening, everyone. Any filmmaker will tell you filmmaking is hard. Within that, in making independent film is harder. And within that, to make an independent film on a much politicized subject is way, way harder. So, one round of applause for Amit, please. All right, so you can all think of your questions, etc. So till that time, I will try to ask my questions. So to begin with, I wanted to sort of just say that for many of us, the Kashmir experience comes via mainstream cinema or mainstream media or state machinery, state publicity, whatever, right? So the way we experience Kashmiri lives is very, very different. So, and many of the times it's marked with sort of, where we kind of try to relate Kashmiri lives with abstract ideas of nationalism, national security, Pakistan, whatever, all these kind of.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yes, right. But here you are born and brought up in Mysore. I was going to say, sorry, Kashmir. So you're born and brought up in Kashmir, and sometimes that's also a little tricky because you're very close to that experience of trauma and what happened when you grew up there, right? So where this urge to tell these stories comes from, and where do you do these, he has made two films. One is Harud, which is available on YouTube to watch, the first film, and then this is, of course, Mag. So where do these stories come from? Is this your lived experiences that you gathered, or can you just give us a little bit of...
A bit of both, actually. This working? I left Kashmir exactly in 1990 when it all started to go to university in Delhi. And so the distance gives me the, I guess, an outsider's perspective at the same time. But being a Kashmiri, I guess, I have personally felt the indignities that come with state oppression, violence, even though I was thousands of miles away, or at least hundreds of miles away, in Delhi and then in Bombay. So yeah, I mean, the whole idea, actually, of making films, I'm a bit of a drifter in that sense. I don't have any background in filmmaking. I didn't go to a film school. I studied history, and then because my father was a judge, I ended up in a law school. I just found myself in a position where I had a story to tell, and I could because I had already spent 15, 20 years in Bombay trying to unlearn the things that I had observed while, faking it as an actor. So, yeah, and also, for me, it was in some ways to reclaim some of that dignity that Kashmiris lost because of the violence and because of the state oppression.
Yeah, I mean, you're being very humble and modest when you say you're faking as an actor, but yeah, that aside.
90% of us do that, don't worry.
Okay. Yeah, but we'll not go into Bollywood tonight,
Yeah,
so let's avoid it. So, coming to there is a very interesting thing about, of course, at the core, it's a story of this woman who's trying to keep her marriage together, somehow, bring her husband back, keep the marriage together, and she also has an option, so to say, with Yasin being there, etc. So at the core, that's the story. But of course, these are ordinary people stuck in extraordinary circumstances, like we would want to say, right, due to reasons not of their own doing. But other than that, there is a lot of cultural information which is very much part of your mise en scène, right? So there are folk songs, there is lifestyle, and then there is landscape. But all of it is so different than what we see in sort of regular Kashmiri imagery that we see in mainstream cinema, or even some videos that we would see on news also, right? So it's very different. There is a stark, very different quality to your entire film's imagery. So I wanted to ask how did that come about? Was it like a conscious choice to think of images which are away from all this?
Yeah, I mean, there was no point in making a film if I wasn't making an anti-Bollywood film in that sense. So, the Dal Lake and the mountains and the song sequences and all of that, basically Kashmir being used as for its geography, basically, nothing else, as a film set. And all the films since the 50s, 60s, obviously everybody went and shot there, and every summer, and so in those films we were invisible, Kashmiris were invisible, or marginal characters. So we were basically watching lives of tourists. When we watched those films, we were watching the lives of tourists who'd come to Kashmir and making jokes about it and saying, half of India is conceived here, all the honeymooners who come, things like that. So for me, the landscape in my films is sort of a reflection of the mental state more than a geography. And that's why it turns out to be so sparse and stark and, grim.
Yeah, I mean, the whole interiority of Nargis is what the winter we see, of course, if there is the imagery. But coming to the narrative, the way you construct narrative, of course, there is a very conscious focus on telling it visually rather than with dialogue or being verbose or everything. So it's a conscious decision to sort of make images talk, whether either oral or visual, than sort of dialogue, right? And also there is no interest in sort of letting the characters, tell us verbally their state of mind, right? So there is, it's left to us to sort of gather the tidbits which are there on the screen in the images and sort of put it together. Sometimes we fail to, sometimes we manage to. So this narrative choice, these narrative choices, also the idea of like sort of using one character's interiority, which is in this case Nargis, and how she is dealing with it. For example, even the violence so much, which is part of the film, but we never see it, right? It's there, like the most telling scene of that is, of course, the scene in the clinic where, we are just getting to know the horrific violence based on how she is responding to what she is hearing, and of course what we are hearing also, right? So why this decision to sort of, these choices?
Couple of things. One is a personal one, that because when actors tend to make films, they firstly want to cast themselves. Then most of those films are like mumblecore, heavy on dialogue, because most actors are insecure and they feel directors haven't used them properly, and this is their opportunity, dialogue delivery and things like that. So I wanted to avoid that, one. And two, it was sort of I won't say artistic, but an aesthetic choice, because I still don't see myself as an artist. Like I said, I've drifted into this line of work. So it was, some of it is obviously my own influences in terms of what I watched after I came to Delhi, and Shakuntalam was a theater in Delhi, and the International Film Festival, and when I was exposed to world cinema as such. So that was something that attracted me. The third is, people who are oppressed are always venting. That is the reality. They're always screaming, but nobody's listening. And in that too, there is a loss of dignity. And like I said, the whole purpose of this exercise was to reclaim some of that dignity and therefore let the silence speak.
Yeah. Talking of dignity, there is a reference to Nargis being from a nomadic community and not being sort of the mainstream or rather upper class, maybe Kashmiri community. So can you tell us a little bit more about that difference? Because at least I don't know. I don't know how many people know. Yes.
Yeah, she's from a Bakarwali community who are basically nomads. And so she is doubly marginalized within, when I actually first wrote the script, Nargis's dialogues were in Bakarwali, and then 1 week before the shoot, I put her in a really difficult spot by telling her that she has to speak Kashmiri, which was a language completely alien to her. She didn't even know the sound of it. But yeah, so it's sort of an internal critique also, patriarchy, tribals, how they are treated. They bear the brunt of not just the state or the army, but also local Kashmiri population, because both sides see them, with suspicion, because they have to work as porters for the army. They probably worked as guides to cross mountains for militants crossing the border. So this community has faced the brunt of both sides. So, and never been really talked about, not even in the news media, and sometimes maybe when there are border clashes, you see them, because most of them are around those regions. But you don't really see them in film. Maybe there has been one documentary made by somebody from the community. But other than that, nothing. So I wanted to bring that in also to, simply because it was not been seen or heard.
Yeah, the representation is important, of course. And also there is much to unpack within this sort of, there's also gender. You can look at it more, if you watch it multiple times, you tend to see the film with different lenses. There is also, in this film, of course, we can also look at it gender, because she's also being sort of, the whole community is sort of suspicious that she's having an affair with this Yasin, and one man in the city, one man in the village. All those dialogues are there, which give us a hint of, her experience. And also he says, it's not a woman's place to go to the army camp. She says, I've been there many times, but he says no. And then eventually the ending itself with the complicated response that happens because he reveals Yasin's identity to the army, right? So, and so this very, sort of complication of script, what we say, is very interesting. But how do you sort of build it in? It's very tempting to build in multiple threads, but also make it very confusing. So, what is your process of sort of holding it together?
I don't know, maybe I am myself a convoluted, knotted up, traumatized person in all sorts of ways. So I guess it just comes out. Of course, when you're writing a script, there are various things, but you don't tend to overanalyze it at the time. It's actually in retrospect that people point out these are the things. I'm mainly focusing at that time on the drama or the character as such, but it's not really, I'm not thinking about, gender issues, but it all comes out organically. So it's
But was there an interest to have like the woman as the protagonist? So that's a choice, clearly.
Yes,
so,
of course,
yeah.
of course. It was women in any conflict are there, always in the background, always having to pick up the pieces. And I also found, for example, the last shot in the film is of mostly women. Parveena Ahangar is a well-known activist who formed this association of parents of disappeared persons. And for more than 30 years, every month, the 10th of every month, they would come to this park in the heart of the city and have this sit-in with their photographs of their sons, brothers, fathers, who had, disappeared. And I think this may have been the last time, actually, that they were finally, because they're not allowed to do that anymore. And for me, to do that for those 30 odd years showed a much greater commitment to the idea of justice and freedom than most of the men in Kashmir. So for me, to bring that out was also important. And I think that is the case in most conflict areas, that you will find that women, despite all the suffering, somehow seem to be more principled. Maybe it is integral, intrinsic in the fact that they are women and they've had to, resist or fight patriarchy from the very beginning, and therefore this is just another,
Another fight. Yeah. I mean, he's referring to the last sequence of Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons in Kashmir, APDP, which used to do this protest every 10th of every month. And that footage is actually of an actual protest. It's not a staged footage. So, I also feel the film, I mean, both your films and more...
This is also the link between my two films,
Yes,
the first film and the second
First film also has that footage of this protest, more than the second film, yes. Also, both your films, first film, Harud, and this one, is a lot about young Kashmiris and their lives. I mean, we have had now, of course, maybe 2 generations which has grown up in the post-militancy era with witnessing state military machinery outside their homes, gun pointing at them all the time, and sort of, everyday existence, living with it, and growing up with it. People who have not, I mean, these are kids who have not seen, or youth who have not seen the prior Kashmir, before 90s Kashmir. And it seems in your film, all these characters too, whether it's Nargis or Manzoor or Yasin also seem to be that. And Arif, the young boy who, the normalization of violence is so revealing when he says, I want to be Mujahideen, and they don't get shocked and slap him or something, they just smile. Sort of, it's a beautiful touch, I thought, in the script. So this idea of sort of engaging with the lives of the young, is this something, because it makes us think and reflect on what could be the future of Kashmir if there is a generation which has grown up in conflict. I mean, as an audience, it makes me think like that. So I'm wondering, is that for you?
I mean, you've answered the question in that sense. Yeah, it is about, the story is about these generations who have seen nothing other than state violence, oppression, and this idea that, outside of Kashmir, the idea is that the army is there to protect the population. But from day one, the guns were pointed at the entire population. The entire population was suspect from day one. And this is the consequence of what has happened in Kashmir. And, that's why I made these films. I'll give you another example. In 2010, for example, how quickly, how easily the narrative changes. It is hardly an hour's flight from Srinagar to Delhi. 2010 protests are happening, and on primetime news, across the board, across the channels, there's the same news of a phone conversation between 2 middle-aged men. How does every news organization get the same breaking news, firstly? Secondly, the men are speaking in Kashmiri, but the audience is non-Kashmiri. And it was hilarious because the 2 men were really bored of the protests. They were stuck indoors, and that is what the conversation was about. And one guy is saying, what are you up to? Nothing, the same, just lounging around. The other guy said, no, but what is your problem? You're a government servant. You will still get your salary. Salary! This is code for money changing hands. This is money going to stone pelters. I don't want to name these guys. They're all stars, media stars, even though they may not be Godi media today, but at that time, they were media stars. So this is the kind of distortion that could happen, and we, again, were watching. We are watching our story being distorted like this every night. So yeah, it is these young people. Obviously, they were angry. So this is the story. This is the effect of the violence, of the cycle of violence, and how they're being portrayed day in, day out, and why would they not be alienated from mainland India in that sense? So for me, their story was more important than those who had seen, who could rationalize, no, but this, before this, in 1950s and 1960s. 370, for example, was gone in the 1950s. Now it is just about silencing. Today, not even a single newspaper can be published without getting a clearance from the governor's office. And the front page is only the governor cutting ribbons and announcing schemes, and there is no news. It's advertisement.
Yes.
Sorry, I
I
have to apologize if I sound incoherent, because I've had 2 sleepless nights. I may have forgotten what the question was about.
No, you
So if
answered
I'm
it.
politically inconvenient, please blame it on my sleep deprivation.
No, I just said it because, it makes us think very deeply about, okay, what could be the future of this place if, every youth is born into this kind of, atmosphere, right? Because its everyday existence is marked by these kind of police checkposts, and we see that there also, of course, your work, for example, humanizes everybody. There is a very humanist approach to telling this. Even the cop is taking bribes, and it's not like a, black and white treatment, so to say. I see that, you have credited Shankar in both films for the writing as well, not just the cinematography. So I was curious about it. Is that because he's actually written, or is this because you're thinking of the visual imagery as very much part of the script, and then the...
No, of course he was a co-writer in both the films. I think the second one I wrote more than he did, but the first one definitely he was there. And of course, and like I said, I haven't been to a film school. My first script that I wrote for Harud was just dialogue. I wanted to say everything and anything about Kashmir that I wanted to say, and it was in dialogue form. It would have been a disaster. Thankfully, Shankar guided me a little bit there, and yeah, so he's been a collaborator from the beginning.
And in both your films, you have, of course, many local Kashmiris acting, because they are non-actors.
Yes.
Clearly, they are non-actors who you have chosen to work with for particular scenes, etc. Even you mentioned outside that Yasin himself is actually a person who runs a weaving workshop, right?
Yes. Manzoor, I'll tell you, Manzoor, for example, when we were looking for locations and found that house, outside the house there was a crowd of young men, boys, mostly men, and curious onlookers. And I hadn't cast the character till then. I saw his face in that crowd. I asked him what his name was, and he said Manzoor. And I had written the script 8 years prior to that, and the character's name was Manzoor, and I asked him to step out. And he was a common villager, a little eccentric, idiosyncratic. And it was towards the end of the shoot that when the scene where he finally eats after snitching, he immediately after that said, I have to go home, my insides are burning. I said, what happened? He said, I can't eat this food. I said, but why? This is common, we got it from one of the homes. He said, no, I can't eat anything spicy. I said, that's unusual. What is the... So he finally told me when he was 19, he was tortured. So I was like, why didn't you tell me earlier? I think thankfully he didn't, because I would have director and this and that and try to extract and maybe traumatize him more. So yeah, as a 19-year-old, he was fed. He was made to drink water mixed with red chili powder, lots of it. Yeah. So to cast an actor, I've always felt, if for a film like mine, if I cast a personality, the person, the way they are, that enriches my script rather than getting a performer, or casting myself would be tragic in that sense. And to place an actor like Zoya and give her the handicap of her not knowing the language makes it sort of a level playing field, because what happens when you have an actor and non-actors, you can easily see that the actor is performing and the others are just being. So yeah, that was my trick, which I learned from Harud as well, because there is only one actor in there, which is Raza Naji, and he also had the same language handicap.
Yeah, he hardly speaks anyway.
No, he can't speak English. It was like sign language. Anyway, that's enough.
Yeah, so I was actually coming to a different question in the sense that you're working with so many Kashmiris for your films. So have you found a way to screen your films in Kashmir, and what was the response like,
I just told you, not even a newspaper can come out, can be published. There's no scope for a film like this. Even outside of Kashmir, this film has won awards internationally, probably the first film in Kashmiri that has been awarded in various festivals, but there are no takers for it for obvious reasons. We had a private screening of my first film in those days, pre-2014. And even then, the first two people who turned up uninvited were people from the crime branch, local crime branch, who after the screening came to me and shook my hand and said, "What do you have to do with this film?" So I said, "I made it." "No, but what do you do otherwise?" I said, "This is what I do." "No, but are you a journalist?" I said, "No, I'm a filmmaker." Yeah. So these are the people who are, there must be a file in my name also, but this is what.
Yeah. But credit to pre-2014 India, it got a national award, your first film.
They misread that film.
So
They completely missed, the citation is completely bonkers.
is there some best Urdu film or something?
Yeah, they had to, there are no other Urdu films with this one.
Okay, cool. I think I will open up because some time waving is going on. So can we open up for questions? Wait. Mike will come to you. Please wait.
Did you face any censorship, state or otherwise, for this film?
Censorship comes in only after the film is made, when it's to be exhibited.
Right. So have you, is this the first time? I'm sorry, I'm not aware. Is this the first time that you're screening the film?
In India?
In Bangalore, in India, yes?
In Bangalore, for the first time. In India, it has had 2 screenings. Festivals normally don't need, they get an exemption from censorship.
Right.
Festivals generally don't need. Screenings like these, which are private in the sense, are not ticketed, they don't need to apply for censorship.
No, by censorship, I don't necessarily mean the CBFC, but even the state or even the army, for example. Like you said, even newspapers today.
The army, if I send the script to the army, they will say no straight away. Because no in the sense that, for example, most Bollywood films, when they go to shoot in Kashmir, if you have stars, it really doesn't matter. For example, Haider was politically inconvenient for the state, but it had mainstream Bollywood stars. All doors open. They've got armed soldiers, armored vehicles, whatever they wanted. Explosions, anything they could do. Somebody like me, especially a Kashmiri making a film, is impossible for them to get. I went for the last film as well, for my last film. And once the PRO for CRPF, not even army, figured out that I'm Kashmiri, his eyeballs went, into the back of his skull, and he was, he disappeared. He made schoolboy excuses after that. He said, "I've got malaria. I can't help you."
I think what he means is like, has your any screening being cancelled or disrupted? Because that's what he means, if I can read him right. Yeah, yeah.
No, not yet, not yet, not yet.
Okay, wait for the mic, please. And so it's a sequence, so yeah.
My question was on the tourist scene and some of the dialogues like Jai Hind, which just completely hit differently as someone who's not Kashmiri. So I just wanted to know how you sort of approach as a Kashmiri the story, like your criticisms against the mainland and the perspectives that you want to inculcate in the mainland. I just want to know how you approach some of those scenes, because I felt a lot of, I agreed with a lot of the perspectives, I think, from the tourist scene in particular. I sympathized.
Yeah, I mean, the tourism also, the nature of tourism has changed in Kashmir. Earlier it was fun and frolic and honeymoon and all of that. Now it's territorial. A lot of tourists come to Kashmir, go to Ladakh even now because of China, because it is to mark territory. That is, and I've experienced it myself. They tend to be, chest out and slightly aggressive, complaining all the time, going up the gondola at like 12,000 feet and saying there are no more, shopping. There's no shopping here. This is useless. That kind of thing. So it's it is somehow it's basically it is sort of a colonial mindset in that sense. It is territory. It has always been territory. That's why, I mean, the whole conversation has been about that. It's been about the land. It's not about the people. They're not your character. That's why you don't see them. So it was a bit of tiny revenge. Sorry to make you uncomfortable.
Hi, Amir. Firstly, thank you. Thank you so much for this, for having this screening. I think
thank BIC for that. Anybody who invites me, I come for free. I'm the only filmmaker probably who pays the audience to come and watch the film.
I'm actually quite stunned and quite intrigued how BIC really opened up a space for a film like this, to be honest. I want to tell you, and this is a confession I want to make as a Kashmiri woman, that you've put me in this liminal phase, liminal landscape between catharsis and non-catharsis, not catharsis, between purgence and between...
Our story is of not finding closure in any case. So,
exactly, it's somewhere between purgence and and indulgence. And so that in that landscape, I find myself wandering. And I say this also as a playwright, as an actor myself. And while I'm still sort of reflecting on the nuances that you put here, because as a Kashmiri, you get really excited if you find voices, if you find a mic to speak onto, thank God. There's no one else to sabotage the mic and speak on your behalf. I think that feeling in itself is quite overwhelming. For you as a filmmaker, I have a very short question, and that comes again, as an actor, I want to ask you, why is Zoya stoic? Was that, Nargis is stoic. Was that Zoya's interpretation of Nargis, or was it the director's call or the screenwriter's imagination of Nargis as somebody being stoic?
Because she has so much to, she's holding things together. She's the one who's she's standing by her husband, protecting the hearth. She's not, she, like you said, she had the option of leaving it all behind. Normally we know somebody who, if he's a militant, would either be found dead or not found at all, So it is again, women show a lot of resilience and courage and strength when they're faced with, they are the ones, who, like I said, they have to pick up the pieces. And I'm not a woman, so maybe I overdid it. But the idea was to bring out this whole thing about how strong women have to be to deal with these kind of, with this kind of loss, this kind of suffering, this kind of violence, where actually the physical violence is mostly happening to the men, but the psychological part of it is far more on the women. So, I don't know, I mean, it wasn't maybe not a conscious thing. Maybe Zoya was attracted to the character because she found it to be strong and stoic. But I won't blame her for playing the way she did it.
I think I want to devoid you of the onus of being asked so many questions. And so my larger question here is for the audience today. आप सब आज इस कहानी के गवाह हैं. You all are a witness to this story. And these are our stories of our everyday lives, our lived realities. How do you go on about lives? I think the larger questions should be asked to yourself once you leave this room. I understand we have Amir here for the larger questions, but I think my point here is कि एक बार जब आप इसके गवाह रह गए, आप शाहिद बन गए इन कहानियों के, तो आप पे ज़्यादा बड़ा ओनस है. आप पे आपकी कलोनियल फैंटेसीज़ पे ज़्यादा बड़ा सवाल है. आपकी उन कलोनियल इमेजिनेशंस को, कश्मीर की कली को, आपकी उन पहाड़ी स्नो कैप्ड माउंटेन्स के बैकड्रॉप पे ज़्यादा बड़ा सवाल है कि आप किस तरह उसको रोमांटिसाइज करेंगे और किस तरह शायद अपने टूरिस्टी एक्सपीरियंस को how will you carry on if you ever go to Kashmir again? How will you depict them in your Instagram reels? I think, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'm by birth a Kashmiri. I've been brought up in J&K. I was really touched when I saw this movie. I think we needed somebody to bring out this part of the emotion as well, of some people who've always been blamed. But my only point here is, and a very, very question right from the heart is, since I've been born and brought up in J&K, I have grown up even with the Pandits. And I have had friends who've been always from,
So you have grown up?
like born and with the Pandits also, like whatever happened after the 1990s, right? We were all young then. My only question is there a way to heal? Because this only is going to rake up more wounds. Could there be a context put into picture so that we could actually visualize? Because, the younger generation, if I assume my daughter watching it, she would only get one perspective. And I'm sorry, I'm asking you this question because I've got the opportunity to face a director for the first time. You see movies, you have very contrasting views many a times. You don't want certain things to be, in, isolation to be projected. But here, I'm sorry, I'm asking you, it's a beautiful concept. Would it be more healing to have a context also to it so that the younger generation can view the whole thing in general, Because even everybody's got hurt through the entire thing that happened.
I think the idea of telling a story should be healing enough to begin with. This is what we do as humans. That is what heals us. That is what therapy is about. You talk about your suffering, your grievances, your trauma, your injuries, whatever it is. So for me as a filmmaker, I think, and without being humble, this is my responsibility to tell the story. How you receive it, whether it changes somebody's life or not, that is not my responsibility as a filmmaker. I am not a politician that I can affect change in that sense in any case. I am just, like she said, a witness in that sense. This is what I witnessed, this is what I'm narrating. And my role is just about that. Now, some people might appreciate it, some people might not. But again, that is not my responsibility. Not for the ones who appreciate it, not for the ones who don't. My job was only, that's why if I could affect any change, I would make this film and screen it everywhere, and it would be on OTT platforms. I can't even do that. So to have a larger conversation about it is beyond my power. My ability is limited to this much, that I can tell this story.
I mean, if I may, as a non-Kashmiri, I think the context has been set so dominantly by many narratives. No, I mean, we also had the recent blockbuster talking about the plight of Kashmiri Pandits in very, very horrific terms also. So, right, so it's like, I mean, I think we can't expect everything from one film. It's not like a one educational film which will send everything about Kashmir. But there have been dominant narrative, and what is interesting about, I guess, for me at least, Aamir's film is it sort of steers away from the dominant narrative and sort of doesn't need to, and it's not interested in setting the context, it's interested in telling a human story of these lives and of Nargis. Yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Amir, here.
Okay, this is the last question,
Yeah.
is what I've been told. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming to BIC and having your film screened. I was waiting for this film from 2022, since when you won the Busan International KB New Currents Audience Choice Award. So,
Thank you to the sponsors.
Pardon?
I said thank you to the sponsors. KB Bank, yeah.
Yeah,
Korean
Busan.
Bank.
Yeah, at Busan in 2022.
Yeah.
It's so hard hitting. My question is, as a non-Kashmiri, I see the restrictions posed on the Kashmiris, and also the US issuing some criminal activity for women not to travel alone to India and stuff like that. When they see all these things happen in Kashmir, that happened. I mean, you can look it up. So, as a non-Kashmiri who is seeing from the outside, how do people live amidst the restrictions, and what is exactly the reality there?
Miserably and silently. That's how they live. I mean, at least 2019 onwards, they can't even raise an eye.
Yeah.
Forget about speaking.
Yeah, what were the restrictions on internet and...
Yeah, of course, we are more than the handicraft, we are more famous for internet shutdowns, so...
Yeah. I saw this Obur film, which was shot on iPhone.
Yes.
At Mami iPhone shot. So, I mean...
Beautiful film.
Yeah, beautiful film.
Beautiful film, beautifully avoiding the politics. But I'm not blaming them. I like the filmmaker. He's a young filmmaker.
Yeah.
He's done a really good job, and the fact that he did it on an iPhone was amazing.
Yeah.
But there are lots of films that have the opportunity, have the access, which I don't have, but they obfuscate the issues, they make it obtuse, and for me, it's disappointing.
Yeah, so hats off to Kashmiris and you, and more power to you, and please keep making films.
Thank you.
Okay, on that note, yeah, please keep making films. And thank you, Aamir, and thank you, BIC, and thank you all of you for staying back for the conversation. Have a good night.